Now I made a DML operation. It is taking a lot of time. So what was this? It is a long running operation. So how many records I can perform a DML operation? 10,000 records. But how many records I am trying to perform? 15,000 records. It is supposed to throw an exception called too many DML rows, 10,000, one exception. So basically, what are these governing limits now? Governing limits are applied by the Salesforce on every functionality to obey multi-tenant architecture. Salesforce internally using multi-tenant architecture to avoid the dominance of any particular application on the cloud. To achieve this multi-tenant architecture, Salesforce has applied some limitations on every functionality. Like we got number of SQL queries 100 within a transaction, number of DML operations 150 within a transaction, number of DML rows 10,000 within the transaction, number of feature jobs 50 within a transaction, number of web services 100 within a transaction. Okay, number of records written by the SQL query 50,000 records with all together. What happened here? 10,000, one exception. Now, if I am making any DML like this in the trigger has to wait until this completes. Am I right? If I make a bulk operation like this in a trigger has to wait until this operation goes. Now, if it's taking 4 seconds, or 10 seconds, or 20 seconds, the entire operation should be in hold. Record will not be saved for that 1 minute or 2 minutes. Am I right? So in that case, we will go for feature. When I go for feature, boss, run this DML separately. I will finish my trigger. Got the story? Now you are making a trigger operation. Now you are trying to make an update. For making this operation, right now you are taking 1 minute plus. You are taking transaction time 1 minute plus. This 1 minute plus time, trigger has to be hold. Suppose it's a before insert trigger. Is the record saved? No. Why? For that 1 minute, the transaction is going until this transaction is completed. Before trigger will not complete. Unless the before trigger complete, record will not be saved. So for 1.5 minute, record is not saved. Just it is processing. Now this will interrupt the operation. Then if you write that logic in a feature method, what happened? That logic will run separately as a feature. Trigger will finish. Trigger says, I inserted the record successfully. You run your logic. When you have completed, update my data. Right? One such type of examples we can have in the feature. Right? Okay, come back. Now our aim is to understand the batch box. Now maximum on how many records you can perform a DML? Maximum number of records on which I can perform DML? 10,000 records. I have a business requirement like this. Fetch all the opportunities which are created in the last 3 months. Okay, set them as closure 1. There are 70,000 opportunities which are created. But how many records you can update? At a time, only 10,000 records on which I can perform a DML. But how many records are there? There are 70,000 records. Then how will you achieve the requirement? Right? Is that was clear for everyone? How will you achieve the requirement? Now we will take it. My business requirement demands that we want to work with a larger amount of data. Boss, fetch all the leads which are created 2 years back, delete them. Because 2 years back created leads are no use now. Now fetch all the leads which are created 2 years back, delete them. There are 30 lakh leads are there. But you say you can delete only 10,000 at a time. Then what will you do? We require the concept to handle such type of data. When you want to work with more data, when you want to work with a larger volume of data, there is 100% possibility of encountering governing limits issue. When you are trying to work with a larger volume of data, there is 100% possibility of hitting the governing limits. Then what I was supposed to do? To resolve this, we require a concept called batch box. What is this batch box? Now, this is the job. Now there are, let's say, 4,000 accounts are there. My requirement is my requirement is like this. Get all the opportunities accounts and set stage name as now. How many accounts are there? 4,000 accounts are there. For 4,000 accounts, total number of opportunities, there is a possibility that we may get more than 10,000 accounts. 4,000 accounts are there. For each account, if you take 2 or 3 opportunities also, total number of opportunities will be more than 10,000. Now, what do you want to update? Opportunities of the account. Now, on how many accounts you are working? 4,000. Now, if I read the logic in a single method, number of opportunities what we are going to get is more than 10,000. We get too many DML rows exception. There is a reason what I have done. I broke this data into number of child jobs. Job is broken into number of child jobs. Instead of running it at a time, I broke them into number of. Then each one 1,000. Now I told run them separately. Finally, finish operation. This is how we got. Get the data, break them into number of batches, then finish. So what is happening here? What is happening in this case? Get the data, break them into number of batches and finish it. Now every batch is going to run separately. Child job 1, child 2, child 1, child 2, child 3, child 4. Now we took the data, we broke the data into number of batches, number of child jobs running. Every child job will run separately. When every child job is running separately, how many circles? How many DMLs? How many rows? So for this 1,000, 10,000 records. Again the same story repeats for every child job. Now if you are running together for entire operation, same limit. When you break them and run separately, for every child we are getting separate limits. This is how we can overcome the issue of governing limits. If you are running like a single method, for the entire method, same set of limits are coming. If you break them into child jobs, run the every child job separately, every child job will get separate governing limits. That is how we can bypass the governing limits. So what is the overall concept? Break the operation into number of sub operations, run them parallelly, and finally conclude with the finish operation. This is the overall. Am I right? So get the job, whatever the operation is happening, get that operation, break them into a number of child jobs, then run them parallelly. Finally, what you want to perform, do it in the finish. So to achieve this, we are supposed to go for a concept called batch effects. What is the concept we have? Batch effects. What is this batch effects? How the Apex class become a batch effects? How you define a Apex class as a batch effects? Listen to the story. If you want any Apex class to behave like a batch effects, class is a global. Why we are taking the class as a global? If you want to make any class as a batch effects, class has to implement database dot. Class has to implement an interface called database dot batchable. When a class implements a interface called database dot batchable, When a class implements a interface called database.batchable, when a class implements a interface called database.batchable, again I repeat, when a class implements a interface called database.batchable, then class has to be a global class. Why? The database.batchable a subject is a database.batchable a subject is a global interface. Because the interface is a global, class has to be a global. I'll put the first point here. Whichever that implements should be global. Right. Next story. What is the next story? Any class which implements interface has to define every method in the interface. Now, in this, what are the methods we have? Start. Start method. The start method is going to be database dot query locator. This is our syntax. First method start. So what I'm doing? Global database dot batchable context, database dot query locator, start database dot batchable context, database dot query locator, start database dot batchable context. Now this start method is used to fetch the data on which we want to run the business logic. This can fetch up to 50 million records. Generally, if you write a SQL query, how many records you get? 50,000. The same SQL query, if you write in the start method, we get 50 million records. Then, how do you execute? Database dot get return database dot get query locator. Whatever the query we are writing, run the query, return the list of records. Then we have next execute. Start method fetch the data and break the data number of and invoke execute method. each. Now, who is calling this? Who is calling this? Start method is going to get the data, break the data into number of batches, and on every batch it is going to invoke execute method. So start will fetch, break the data into number of childs. On every child it is going to call execute. Then syntax is going to be global void database.batchable context VC list of account scope. Now, when you break the data, start method fetch the data, broke them into batches. Let us say total 980 records are there. Let us say if there are 950 records, the last we are going to have 150. Total I received 950 records. I broke them. Now execute is called on every. Now this 200 records, the execute method is going to run on this 200 records. This execute method is going to run on this 200 records. Right. These 200 records on which the execute is running, those records are in the scope. The scope will tell list of records on which this execute is running. Now when they are divided into number of child jobs, on every child job execute is running. Now the records on which that execute is running, on these 200 records the execute is running, they are in scope. Scope is a variable. You can take any variable of your choice. I took the variable name as scope. I hope you are good. The list of records on which the execute is running, the list of records on which the execute is running, they are in scope. Let me take this to for account. Update one. Right. Then last one, finish method. After completing all the batches, after completing all the executes, after finishing, because all of them are going to run separately, they are going to run independently. After finishing all of them, you want to perform any final logic? This is how we define. We'll go back to the story. This will run after completion of we have global void this is how I wrote. For account A, it is a scope basically, right? Now, whatever the post batch operation you want to perform, like sending an email, the type of stuff, we can do it in finish method. Right. So, batch implements database.batchable, start method to write the query and fetch the data, and automatically breaks the data into number of batches. On every batch, execute is going to run. After finishing the execute, finish method is called. I hope you got the story. Clear for everyone? Execution will see. The concept is clear for everyone. Okay. Let us try one example. Write a batch apex. Write a batch apex. Write a batch apex to fetch all the opportunities whose opportunities and update their stage name as closed one and closed it as true. Look at the existing code. First, the class has to implement how you are defining. Global class implements a database dot batchful. Now in this case, what is the first one? Global batchful context. Global void right. Then take one by one opportunity. Opportunity. This is how we get. Is that was clear for everyone? Start method is writing a query, getting the data. How many records we can fetch? 50 million records. Execute method is to run the logic. Finish method, after completion of all the executes, final operation is finished. Now the question is, how do you execute this? How do you execute this? First, create the object for this. Batch example. Create the object for the class. Then job ID equal to database dot execute, database dot execute batch. What is the object we want to execute? B. When you want to execute the batch, start method will break the data into number of subgroups. Now in each group, how many records should be there? Start method will break. Okay, is it 10 records, 10 records, 10 records, or 100, 100, 100, or 1000, 1000, 1000? What is the size? It gives. Now, the size can be anything between it can be 1 to 2000. You can give anything between 1 to 2000. If I don't mention the size, it will take default value as 200. So when I say 5 records, 1 batch. If I don't mention the size, by default it will take 200. By default it will take 200. If I don't mention the size, by default it will take 200. If I don't mention the size, by default it will take 200. If I don't mention the size, by default 200. If I don't mention the size, by default 200. Is that was clear for everyone? Execute. When I execute, what will happen? Async apex job. Jobs. Apex jobs. What is batch apex? It is in the holding state. Once it is in the queue, once it start, it will tell you how many batches are there and what is the status of this. Now, any asynchronous job that is registered with the Salesforce has to be, any asynchronous job that is running in the Salesforce has to be registered with async apex job. Async apex job. Right. It is in the hold state. Let's wait for the file. Meanwhile, I'll go for the example. One more example.
In the first line, you didn't mention the S object. What you mention the S object? You don't need to mention.
I don't know what object we are going to use. It should be generic, no? Now, Salesforce has given batchable S object because it is ready to support any object you use. Now, always you write in the opportunity only. Always you write an account only, no, right? We can use any of the object.
But if you know the object,
now, if you know the object, but syntax will not change, no? Right, okay. There is a question, why we are using S object here? Why don't you put opportunity? This they have given, syntactically they are given S object because they want to support every S object. Because within the execute method, in which data you are going to perform the logic? I am performing the logic on opportunity. Now I told you in previous example, account and opportunities. I want to fetch accounts and I want to write a logic on opportunities. Then which S object you are going to use? Account, comma, opportunity. Now I am not sure what objects I am going to use within the batch. So it has to support everything. There is a reason they given a syntax of S object. Meanwhile, let me go back and see the status. So it is in the holding state. Okay. Meanwhile, let me run a quick logic here. Now I have Wilson or Satish. Satish is the user. Wilson is the user. Who is the manager of Wilson? The owner of the user is Satish. Satish is the owner of the user. Now, who is the owner of this opportunity? Let us see. There are some opportunities. Let us take a business requirement here. By business requirement says Wilson is one of the sales executive. Wilson is one of the sales executive. He resigned from the company. When he resigned from the company, he is already holding some opportunities. He is dealing with some opportunities and accounts. But he resigned from the company. When he resigned from the company, before I make this user inactive, whatever the opportunities he is holding, which are not closed yet, now he is in the middle of the process. Whatever the opportunities he is holding, which are in the middle of the process, I want to reassign those opportunities to manager. Now, Wilson is one of the executive or business developing manager. He is resigning from the company. Whatever the opportunities which he is holding, still they are not closed. I want to reassign them to the manager. Now, there is a possibility that there may be more than 10,000. I'm assuming, as per my business requirement, there will be more than 10,000. Then what I want to do? I want to go for a batch. But when this should happen? When this should happen? When you try to deactivate. When you try to deactivate a user, then this should happen. Okay. When you want to deactivate a user, this should happen. This process should happen when you try to deactivate a user. When you are trying to deactivate a user, the process should happen. Now, when you try to deactivate a user, automatically some logic should run. What is the concept here? Trigger. When you are making some changes, automatically you want some logic to run. That is a trigger. Okay. So, when user is deactivated, trigger should fire. Trigger should call batch apex. Batch apex should apex. Batch apex should assign the owner of the record as manager. Now, let us take the combination of these two. You know that it is taking some time to run. Meanwhile, we can complete one more example. Then I am giving. Batchable. So now else I can straight away give. Now, batch apex is a apex class. Apex class will have constructor, right? Then I wrote global now. If you pass the current user ID and manager ID, I'll run my logic. When you come owner ID from opportunity where owner ID equal to run based on the owner ID and executive ID. I am writing a query. What is your logic here? Global void batchable context. Up to list op dot owner ID equal to assign the owner ID as manager. Update. Am I right? Fetch all the records which are owned by the user. Reassign them to manager. You are passing manager and executive. Then global finish. This is how I wrote. So what is this? If you pass the manager ID and executive ID, they will write a query to get all the records which are owned by that executive, and it is going to assign to manager. Now this should run with what? Trigger. Trigger on what? Trigger on user object. When user is deactivated, trigger should run. When user is deactivated. Now this should run before update. What I'm doing, it is a good practice to write the logic in the Apex class, but I'm straight away writing in the trigger. Full map of ID user. Why? User should be deactivated, right? Now I should see whether user is deactivated or not. How do you know that? Is active is true, is active is false. Whichever the user is modified, take that user. If old dot is active not equal to false, and new user if old user is the old value of user is active is not equal to false and new value is false, that means user deactivated. Then what should I do? Batch example 3 b dot batch. What I was supposed to pass? New user dot. Now it is not the okay. I was supposed to pass user ID, comma, the user ID, comma, executive ID. There's some bug here. What was that? Constructor batch example. Okay, sorry. This is not the right format. I was supposed to give the parameter, right? Then, what was the logic here? Whenever manager ID, comma, and database dot execute d, comma, you can give the size 5 or something like that. Basically, we give 200, 400 like that. Because I don't have records, I give 5. Because I don't have records, I want to show multiple batches are running, I give the size equal to 5. Otherwise, generally 200 or 400 will be giving. What was the logic here? Whenever the user is deactivated, call the batchbox by passing the manager ID and execute ID. So go back to the story. Go to the user. Wilson. I think testing and HDFC we made it, right? Testing and HDFC. Active. I deactivated the user. Wilson I deactivated. Go to the opportunities. There are 2 records called testing and HDFC. Go to HDFC. Check out who is the owner. Now what may be the reason? Trigger finished. Trigger finished, but logic not finished. So why? It is asynchronous operation. Probably it is waiting in the queue for its turn. Let us look at this. So the advantage of this asynchronous operation, this operation, look at this. Probably this will be in holding state or unexpected token. Okay. There is a query here. There is something wrong in the query. Where owner ID equal to okay. Again, if I want to run this, activate the wells. Now look at that. Batchbox failed, but trigger is not failed. Batchbox failed, trigger is not failed. Trigger completed. Why trigger completed? Because batchbox is running independently, asynchronous. I will not wait for your operation to complete. I will not wait for your operation. I don't have any dependency on you. I am finishing. When you are finished, you tell me. So even the batch is failed, but still trigger completed. Trigger completed successfully. Now go back again. View. Deactivate. Okay. Go back to the opportunity. First, let me go and see job is done or failed. Batch is complete. How many batches are there? Because you may have less than 5 records. Go to HDFC now. Cross check the owner. Right. Now the question here is previously batchbox failed, but there is no impact on the trigger. Previously batchbox failed, but there is no impact on the trigger. Why there is no impact? Why there is no impact? There is no impact because batchbox is a asynchronous job. It is not going to run along with the trigger. It will run independently. You take any time you want, but I am not having any dependency on you. I will finish off my job. When you are finished, you tell me your success or failure because you are asynchronous operation. Is that was clear for everyone? People are clear? Because that is a asynchronous operation. It doesn't have any dependency on it. So it is going to run independently. That's what I told. Advantage of asynchronous operation. When the operation is taking too much time, too long time, we want to run it independently. Now trigger cannot wait. Batchbox is working on 70,000 records. Now should I wait for the 70,000 records to complete before saving my record? Before deactivating my user? No, I don't want to stay. So I am deactivating right now. Operation is initiated. Okay, operation is initiated. You work on that 70,000 record. I am finishing off my trigger. Are you getting my point? Any operation taking longer time, we can avoid that by putting that logic within a asynchronous operation. Tell me the asynchronous operation: batch, schedule, queuable, future. Right, Amma? Okay. Now, how many jobs came here? Look at the point. Look at this. How many jobs came? 7. So they are divided into 7 different batches. I hope the logic is clear for everyone. Logic is clear. First point you need to understand is it is a class. When I say it is a class, it will have everything that a class will have. Then it is having extra functionality of that interface. But basically, what are you? You are a class. How do you execute a batchbox? Database dot execute batch object of the class size. Size can be anything between 1 to 2000. If I don't give the size, by default it is going to take 200. Is that was clear for everyone? Concept is clear, right? Okay. Now the next story is I have a count like this, integer count. Now they told this has modified the value. This has modified the value. Now count has become 1. Now what is the count value here? So the change what you made on this variable is it transferred to the next one? In the class we have some variables. the changes what we made on these variables by one execute, are they reflected to another execute? If they are reflected, count will be what? 950. If they are not reflected, what is the value of count? So what batchworks do? Count equal to 0, run the operation. Again for next execute. Again for the next execute. Again for the next execute. So the changes what we made on the variables of the class, they are not reflected to another executes. So what is the final count value? 0. But what if you want to transfer the data? By default they are not getting transferred. What if you want to transfer the data? First let me execute one example, show whether the data is getting transferred or not. If it is not getting transferred, we'll see the solution for it. I hope syntax of writing this is clear for everyone. Everyone is good with this syntax? People are good with this syntax, Amma? Syntax of writing a batch of X, is that was clear for everyone? So we have this global database dot then we are taking global batchable context negative for account A, count equal to count plus 1, then I have this how we have defined. Here I am giving finish method when it comes after completion of all the executes. After completion of all the executes, the finish method comes. Now I am trying to see. By the time I am executing the finish method, what is the value of counter size? Now I gave count equal to count plus 1, size equal to size plus 1. After finishing all the execute methods, what is the final value of count and final value of size? Completed. Go to account. Count equal to 0, size equal to 0. So the changes made by one execute, are they transferred to another execute? The changes are not getting transferred to another execute. The changes made in one execute, they are not getting transferred to another execute. That is the reason we are getting count equal to 0, size equal to 0. But I have a requirement where the changes made in one execute, I want to reflect back into another execute. The changes what we made in one execute, we want to reflect back into another execute. The changes what we made in one execute, we want to reflect them into another execute. Then how it is possible? I am not making any changes here. Only one extra interface I am implementing. Database dot. We didn't write any changes on the code. We implemented one interface called database.stateful. That means the changes that are made by one execute on the variable of the class will be transferred to another execute. I want the changes made by one execute on a variable should be transferred to another execute. Then we are going to implement database.stateful. Then we are going to implement an interface called database.stateful. Same program I will run. Count equal to 25, size equal to 0. Now count is 25, size is 0. Why? I took two variables, one static, one non-static. Count is non-static, size is static. When I implement database.stateful, state of the non-static variables are transferred between the execute. When you want the data to be transferred, exchanged between the executes, we will define non-static variable in the class and we implement an interface called database.stateful. When I implement a database.stateful, data, that is the changes made by one execute, will be reflected back to another execute. Database.stateful. When you want to transfer the changes made by one execute to another execute, we need database.stateful interface. Tell me one context where we can use this. I told, get me all the opportunities which are not progressing. 45,000 opportunities came. Get me all the opportunities which are not progressing. From last 30 days, stage is not modified. There is no improvement on the opportunity. Get those records. 45,000 records are there. Now I told, group them according to the manager. When I told, group them according to the manager, all the manager records are going to be in anywhere between 45,000. Now when you divided them into batches, 1,000, 1,000, 1,000. In the first 1,000, Satish has 3 records. In second 1,000, Satish has 2 records. In last 1,000, Satish has 50 records. Then what happened? My data is available in multiple executes. All the data which are available in multiple executes for me, they need to be grouped and kept at one place. Are you getting? First execute data added, plus second execute data added, plus third execute data added, fourth execute data added. We want to put all the data of Satish from multiple executes in a single variable. So they are sharing the data. When they want to share the data, we need to go for, we'll see them, whatever the example I explained right now, we'll see it in the email programming. Okay, next class I'm going to take the email programming. There I'm going to put the data in the email and send it. Right. So can I exchange the data between the execute to execute? By default, no. But if you implement database.stateful, we can share it. The next one. While executing, it goes like this. What is the execution order? No. The database dot. And what happened? You will go and register in now when I say it, job is registered 707. Now it goes to queue. How many batch jobs are running here? No batch jobs are running. Again, I call this one more time. This many at a time I am calling all this. One more job. When I say database dot execute batch, one more job. How many jobs are running? Only one. So add to the queue. Third job. Fourth job. Fifth job. Sixth job. Already 5 batch jobs are running here. When already 5 jobs are completed here. Already 5 jobs are completed here. Now, if you get a 6th job, you cannot add it to the queue. They will be added to the flux queue. They will be in holding state. At a time, how many jobs can run? Only 5 jobs can run at a time in the queue. How many batch jobs can run at a time? Only 5 batch jobs can run at a time. If they are trying to execute more than 5 jobs at a time, they are added to what? Flux queue. In the flux queue, they will be in holding state. When any one of the job is finished here, from the flux queue, the job will be added to. How many batch jobs can run at a time? Only 5 batch jobs can run at a time. If it is more than 5, the jobs are added to flux queue. They are in holding state. They are in holding state. When any one of the job in the queue is completed, from the flux queue, that will be added to queue. At a time, how many batch jobs can run? Only 5 batch jobs can run. At a time, how many batch jobs can run? At a time, only 5 batch jobs can run. At a time, how many batch jobs can run? 5 batch jobs can run. I hope you are good. We will continue this in the next session. The email programming and extension of this schedule effects with a batch effects combination. Email programming, we'll see it tomorrow.